Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has announced Takatso Consortium as the new strategic equity partner for South African Airways. Takatso will own 51% of the restructured airline, while government will hold a 49% stake. Government says it will not be putting any more money into the new airline. Takatso will invest just over 3 billion rand in the new SAA. Now let's discuss this further with Owen Nkomo, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Inkunzi Investments. Owen, let's try this again. Hope you can hear me now. Just talk to us more about how this deal was structured with Takatso Consortium. There seems to be more questions rather than answers here.
Yes, I do think there are some questions that need to be answered. But I think that generally we should be glad that asset has been put into private hands. I think the most important question for us is the valuation of the transaction. If you think about the fact that we've been paying SAA 10 billion rands a year to operate, giving it 5 billion rands in guarantees from the government, and the transaction consummated is just over 6 billion rand. It makes one wonder if this is a fair value of this asset. If the guys who are taking the entity over have paid the right price. But I guess because the entity was obviously under a lot of pressure, maybe the guys who had the cash, if they did have the cash indeed to plug into the transaction, had the upper bargaining hand. So hence the transaction is calling for them to bring in, for 51%, they're going to bring in about 3 billion odd rands of cash. And I imagine that they're still going to use some guarantees from somewhere. They are not necessarily going to use cash. So they're going to need about 3 billion rands to use over the next 3 odd years to see if they can turn SAA around. And I think one thing that it's got going for it, this particular transition, is the existence of Telkom, where a similar structure happened with the government reducing its shareholding and the private sector being a major shareholder in Telkom. We saw the fortunes of Telkom turning around, and hopefully we now have more reasons to say SAA, as the government has intimated, cannot come to the government or the taxpayer to look for bailouts.
Now, my next question to you was going to be, isn't it too late for SAA, to turn the airline around? But you've mentioned that this structure and this deal will hopefully see if we can actually turn it around. I mean, interestingly, the Minister Gordhan saying that the consortium, or at least the airline, will not be bailed out again by government. But we've heard him say this many times.
Yeah, no, look, I think this time is different because the majority shareholder, the private shareholder, they would have to put up some of their assets, some of their balance sheets if they're going to go and look for money. And importantly, it takes the fight away from the government, against the unions. It takes the fight to the private players led there by Babu, Tsepo, Matwele, and the rest of his team at Harris Partners and their other partners who are acting some of the cash. But I really think when assets are not in the government hands, they are run in a commercial manner. And if they're going to fall, they're going to fall in a commercial manner as well. So they cannot come back to the shareholder and ask for assistance. I think that we can rest assured that SAA hopefully is not going to be coming cap in hand to the government just for money. But importantly, I do believe that you could see some key restructures going on there. Maybe new management, and you could potentially see, people getting let go again. But I imagine that some of the provisions of the transaction are that no more people will be let go from the entity. But whatever happens, I was personally hoping that the man in the street will be given a chance to become a shareholder in this new entity, because boy, oh boy, we have given this company lots of money over the years.
Talking about the man in the street hopefully getting some form of share, do we know how the new board in this consortium is then to be constituted?
No, at this stage, I don't have a full grasp of who sits on the board of the entity. I haven't analyzed that much, but one hopes that in the interest of AE, in the interest of broad-based, shareholding in this company, like I've said, with us having supported SAA over the years, one hopes that, a structure to attract a broad-based shareholding will be created very soon. I hope Ratepo and the guys are listening. Please, guys, can you set up a BE structure that will involve the man in the street? After all, it's taxpayers' money that has kept this thing relatively afloat so that you guys could buy it. So it's important, in my view, for us to ensure that more hands than just a few hands sitting at Harris are beneficiaries of this transaction.
Now, when you say that, what exactly does it mean for the ordinary South African paying tax as far as it relates to SOEs, especially those that are presumably supposed to have an impact, socially? We're seeing so many of them not doing that currently. And I also note the statement by Busa welcoming this move by government, saying that these kinds of transactions, they enable injection of private sector capital and expertise into the operations of similar SOEs.
Yes, look, I think the one big thing possibly that's going to happen with SAA being privatized is that the company is going to be run with a closer look at the numbers. The company is going to be run with a closer understanding that their numbers will be audited. So corruption is going to be monitored. The supply chain is going to be managed properly. Hopefully the transformation agenda as well as the company from a management and pilots perspective will taken care of. But for the men on the street, like I said, not many of us actually ever used SAA when we were traveling locally. And I'm imagining that the majority of locals, or rather the men in the street, do travel back to their towns, Durban, Cape Town, etc., using cheaper airlines. So we never really got the benefit of SAA. But SAA as a company always got a benefit from us. So hence my call to say, perhaps maybe let's let the men in the street in on this transaction. But as I say, the biggest thing in my view is that the company gets run professionally and the numbers are going to get managed with the light of saying we need to be audited. At some point we're going to be audited, and when we go to the capital market, our books must make sense and we must not engage in corrupt activities.
I would imagine company like this running professionally will also bode very well with investors. While I have you on the line, we know that President Cyril Ramaphosa is at that G7 summit. Obviously, this is something that he will be taking to any potential investors. Do you think that this is something that they will actually look at and consider, investing more into the country, given that this is not the only big announcement, as it were, that President Cyril Ramaphosa made, including that energy announcement that he did not too long ago?
I think that he's got a couple of nice announcements to make, including SAA transaction, the G7, and to potential investors in the country in general. He's got good news on the Eskom side, with Eskom having started to save some cash, particularly on their debts, by reducing their debts by about 80-odd billion. And I think SABC as well, having started to turn positive, at least for the past month, as has been reported in the media. That is a good thing. And, the increase in production by private producers of electricity to 100 megawatts is also very welcome, to say, listen, guys, we're starting to turn the engines of the country into a direction that says the private sector can participate and drive capital into state-owned enterprises. We're going to turn them around. They're going to stop bleeding. Sitting where we're sitting, we're starting to have faith in the fact that the right things are being done or being made. And this follows on after some recent, suspensions that happened in the leading party. And one wonders if all these decisions being made now post the suspension of some leading, opposing guys in the leading party has anything to do with this government announcement. Potentially, there is, and that means that decision was the right decision to make. Now President Ramaphosa and his remaining cabinet can make these decisions, relating to SOEs where we should be able to save cash. Hopefully the rest of the SOEs, like the post office, are going to move in the same direction. We need to clean up across these state-owned enterprises and take that money and use it to grow the economy than to just dump it in dark holes where we don't have an idea how long those challenges are going to remain in the state-owned enterprises. But certainly good news across the space, particularly with the president going to the G7, and a stronger currency is also very important, in my view, for these investors.
All right, Owen, thank you so much. On that G7, note, that's where we have to leave our chat for this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. That was Owen Nkomo, Chief Investment Officer at Inkunzi Investments, just giving us a little bit of his analysis on the SAA Takatso Consortium deal.